The fire crackled beside me, but nothing warmed the cold in their eyes. His father pointed a trembling finger and said, "She's cursed. She's the reason you have no child." I clenched my jaw, holding back tears. I wasn't just battling infertility. I was fighting to prove I was human. But the day the DNA test arrived, the silence in the room was louder than every insult he'd ever thrown. Ayomide used to wake up with a smile. Every morning felt like a new page in a love story. When she married Tajuddin, she thought she had walked straight into her destiny. A man with a gentle voice, soft hands, and eyes that promised safety. His family welcomed her with open arms. His mother called her my answered prayer, hugging her so tight the first day they met that Ayomide cried from joy. For a while, life was beautiful. They danced in the kitchen. They prayed together before sleep. Tajuddin would rest his head in her lap and whisper, "You make me whole, Ayo." And Ayomide believed it, deeply. She gave all of herself to this new family, to the dream of building something sacred. But slowly, cracks formed. 2 years passed. No baby, no bump, no celebration. And suddenly, the love started to fade. Not loudly, but quietly, painfully. Tajuddin stopped reaching for her hand in public. His laughter became rare. His eyes, once full of affection, now looked at her like she was a puzzle missing a piece. A silent question hung between them every time she entered the room. "Why are you still empty?" His mother, once so sweet, now greeted her with dry smiles and long sighs. The gifts stopped. The warmth vanished. At family gatherings, whispers floated around her like smoke. Maybe she's hiding something. Maybe it's spiritual. One night, as Ayomide reached for Tajuddin in bed, he gently pulled away. No anger, just distance. And in that quiet rejection, something inside her cracked. She stared at the ceiling, eyes wide open, wondering, when did love become something I have to earn? But the worst part wasn't the words they said. It was the silence. The way Tajuddin no longer asked how she felt. The way his father, Chief Adekunle, barely acknowledged her anymore. It was as if she'd become invisible, a shadow moving around their home. Ayomide still cooked his favorite meals, still prayed for his success, still smiled through the ache in her chest. But one morning, as she caught him watching her, not with love, but with quiet blame, she knew something had changed. And it wasn't just him, it was everything. The whispers didn't start all at once. At first, it was just looks, sharp glances from aunties, quick silences when Ayomide entered the room. Then it became murmurs, phrases like, "Some women are sent to destroy homes," or "her womb must be tied." They never said it to her face, but she felt it in every conversation she wasn't invited to, every blessing she wasn't given. Chief Adekunle, Tajuddin's father, had always been stern, but now his disappointment turned into disgust. He stopped hiding it. One evening, after dinner, he leaned back in his chair, stared at Ayomide, and said, "You are blocking this family's blessings. We need to cleanse this house." That night, a strange man in a white robe showed up at the house. He burned herbs that made Ayomide cough and chant words she didn't understand. They told her to kneel for hours. Another day, she was made to drink bitter roots that burned her throat. She was told not to question, only to obey, because this was for the family's future. Ayomide sat through it all, trying to convince herself it was just tradition. But deep inside, her spirit was breaking. The worst came on a Sunday, during a family meeting with elders present. She sat quietly beside Tajuddin, holding his hand, hoping he would defend her. But then Chief Adekunle stood, voice booming. "She's a witch! She has brought a curse to this family. We had sons before her, and now nothing. It's her. She's the problem." Gasps filled the room. Tajuddin didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor. Ayomide sat frozen. Her ears rang, her heart pounded, but her voice, it disappeared. She slowly stood, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and broke. On the cold tile floor, she wept silently, hugging her knees to her chest. Her tears weren't just from the insult. They came from something deeper. She remembered every prayer she had prayed for that family, every act of love, every dream she had carried, and now, all of it reduced to a cruel name, witch. That night, Ayomide looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "Maybe love was never really here." Ayomide waited until no one was watching. She told Tajuddin she was visiting an old friend and slipped away early in the morning. Her heart pounded the entire ride to the fertility clinic. The waiting room felt too quiet, too bright, and every smile from the nurses felt like pity, but she stayed, because deep down, she needed the truth, not just for herself, but for her sanity. When the doctor came in, soft-spoken and kind, Ayomide sat up straight. They ran every test: blood, hormone levels, scans. She answered every question, even the ones that made her eyes sting with shame. A week later, she returned for the results. The gynecologist looked at her with gentle eyes and said, "Your body is healthy, Ayomide. You are perfectly fertile." Ayomide blinked. For a moment, she felt a strange relief. She wasn't broken, but then a shadow passed over her heart. If it wasn't her, then who? The doctor hesitated before speaking again. "You may want to consider having your husband tested too," she said softly. "Sometimes answers lie in both places." Ayomide smiled, but it was empty. "He would never," she whispered. She knew Tajuddin too well. His pride was taller than any truth. The very idea of being tested would offend him. To him, infertility was always the woman's fault. That's what he'd been taught. That's what his father believed. That night, Ayomide sat in bed beside him. He scrolled through his phone, laughing at something he didn't share with her. She turned to him, her voice trembling, and said, "Taju, would you ever consider getting tested?" He paused, lowered his phone slowly, and stared at her. "So now you think I'm the problem?" he said, not angry, but wounded, like she'd betrayed some unspoken rule. She smiled again, just like she had at the clinic. "No," she said. "I just wanted to be sure." He didn't respond. He turned off the light and rolled over. In the darkness, Ayomide lay awake, her hands resting on her stomach, not because she was empty, but because she finally knew she wasn't. And still, she felt more alone than ever. Ayomide was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of stew, when her phone rang. The number was unknown. She hesitated before answering. On the other end, a woman's voice, low and trembling, said just one sentence. "Your husband has a child, but not with you." Ayomide froze. The spoon slipped from her hand and clattered against the pot. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. But the caller had already hung up. At first, Ayomide wanted to ignore it. Maybe it was a cruel joke. Maybe someone was just trying to hurt her. But the words played over and over in her mind. And a part of her, the quiet, aching part, felt something click. A thread had been pulled. She couldn't stop now. That night, while Tajuddin slept beside her, she opened his old drawers. Not to snoop, but to search for the truth. She looked through receipts, forgotten photos, files stored deep in his email. One document caught her eye. A recurring transfer to a woman's name she didn't recognize. Zola. She followed that name. It led to old employee records from the family compound. Zola had been a housekeeper for Chief Adekunle years ago, and now she had a child. Ayomide didn't tell anyone. She simply got in a car and drove to where the records said Zola now lived. A small town outside Ibadan. The woman who opened the door was quiet, older than Ayomide expected, with tired eyes and a protective look in her stance. "I just want to talk," Ayomide said gently. They sat, and slowly Zola opened up. "I was told never to speak of it. Not to you, not to him." "Was it Tajuddin?" Ayomide asked. Zola hesitated, then shook her head. "Number he never knew. It wasn't him." Ayomide's heart raced. "Then who?" Zola looked away. "Ask the man who hates you most. Ask the one who called you cursed." Ayomide felt the floor shift beneath her. This wasn't just betrayal by a husband. It was a secret buried by generations, and she was finally holding the shovel. Ayomide sat across from Zola in the tiny, dimly lit room. The walls were cracked, the air thick with secrets. Zola poured tea with shaking hands, but her eyes avoided Ayomide's. There was something heavy in her silence, a story locked behind her lips for too long. Finally Zola spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave birth to a son. He's 10 now." Ayomide's heart thudded. "And Tajuddin, he's the father." Zola nodded slowly, but something in her eyes didn't match the words. Her hands trembled more now. She wouldn't look directly at Ayomide. Ayomide leaned in, her tone soft but firm. "Zola, are you sure? Are you telling me everything?" Zola's lips quivered. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she whispered, "I was told never to say anything. Not to you, not to Tajuddin." "Who told you that?" Ayomide pressed gently. Zola looked down. "Chief Adekunle." That name sent a cold wave through Ayomide's spine. But why would he? Zola hesitated. Because it wasn't Tajuddin. Ayomide sat frozen. Zola's voice broke as she continued. When I was working in their house, Chief Adekunle came to my room. More than once. I never spoke about it. I was scared. He said if I ever told anyone, I'd regret it. Ayomide's breath caught in her chest. This wasn't just about betrayal now. It was deeper, darker. The same man who accused her of being cursed had buried his own sin and used her pain to cover his shame. Tears welled in Zola's eyes. When the baby was born, they told me to leave. They gave me money and said to disappear. I never wanted to destroy anyone's life. Ayomide reached across the table, her hand gently covering Zola's. You didn't destroy anything. They did. She sat back, her mind racing. All this time, she thought she was the broken one. All this time, they blamed her, shamed her, judged her. But now she had a name, a face, and the truth, and she wasn't going to bury it. Ayomide couldn't sleep for days. Her mind kept circling back to Zola's quiet confession. The puzzle pieces didn't just fit. They screamed a truth too cruel to ignore. She knew she needed proof, not just for herself, but for every silent accusation she'd endured in that house. So one evening, while Zola's son played with a toy car, Ayomide carefully collected the boy's toothbrush and sealed it in a plastic bag. Her hands shook, but her heart was steady. Back at home, she opened an old drawer and pulled out Tajuddin's worn comb. It still had strands of his hair tangled between the teeth. She stared at it for a long time, the irony almost laughable. This was the man who let his family shame her, yet here she was, holding his truth in her hands. At the clinic, Ayomide made sure her name didn't appear anywhere. Everything was discreet. The technician didn't ask questions, and she didn't offer any answers. Then came the waiting, the slow, agonizing wait. When the results finally arrived in a sealed envelope, Ayomide sat alone in her room. She hesitated before opening it, her fingers trembling. She braced herself for the final blow, for the confirmation that Tajuddin had lied and cheated. But what she read changed everything. Tajuddin, not the father. Her breath hitched. She read it again and again. Then her eyes drifted to the second page, where the lab had cross-checked the boy's DNA with the second sample she'd submitted out of sheer suspicion. Chief Adekunle, 99.98% match. The room felt suddenly still. Time froze. The same man who had looked her in the eyes and called her cursed. The same man who had gathered elders to perform rituals to cleanse her womb. The same man who told his son to marry someone more fertile. He was the one carrying the sin. He had fathered a child in silence and let her burn for it. Ayomide didn't cry. She didn't scream. She folded the papers neatly, placed them back in the envelope, and whispered to herself, the truth has waited long enough, and now it was ready to speak. The family living room was filled with laughter, plates clinking, and the smell of roasted meat. It was supposed to be a cheerful gathering, cousins reuniting, old stories shared, and a sense of unity around the table. Ayomide sat quietly, smiling gently, her hands calm on her lap, her eyes watching every face like a silent observer. No one noticed the sealed envelope in her purse, or the fire behind her soft smile. When the moment felt right, she stood up slowly. The room fell quiet. Her voice was soft but strong. I have something I need to share, she said. Tajuddin looked up, confused. Chief Adekunle sipped his drink, uninterested. Ayomide reached into her purse and placed the thick white envelope on the table. I was called many names, she said, her gaze now locked on the chief. Cursed, barren, even a witch. But I never fought back with words, because I knew the truth doesn't need to shout. She slid the envelope forward. This is your real curse. A cold silence swept over the room. Chief Adekunle raised an eyebrow, then grabbed the envelope with a mocking smirk. He opened it casually, but as his eyes scanned the papers, the smirk vanished. His hand trembled. The pages fell from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. His wife gasped loudly, putting her hand over her mouth. Adekunle, is this true? Tajuddin's face twisted in disbelief. Father, what is this? No one moved. The truth filled the room like heavy smoke, impossible to escape. Chief Adekunle opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His once booming voice, the same voice that condemned Ayomide in front of everyone, had nothing left to say. Ayomide didn't flinch. She simply walked over, picked up the fallen papers, and calmly said, I was never the problem, but I was always the target. As she turned to leave, she passed by Tajuddin, who stood frozen, shame written all over his face. Ayomide smiled one last time, not out of revenge, but from freedom. The curse they had tried to pin on her had always lived in their own house, and now everyone knew. The silence after Ayomide's revelation didn't just end that family gathering, it shattered everything that had once held their house together. In the days that followed, whispers turned into headlines, and the truth spread like wildfire through their community. Chief Adekunle, once feared and respected by many, now walked with his head low. Neighbors no longer greeted him. His name no longer held weight. His power vanished with the truth. His wife, who had defended him blindly for years, packed her bags one morning and left without a word. She couldn't look at him, couldn't sleep beside the man who had lied, betrayed, and humiliated not only Ayomide, but their entire family. Her silence was louder than any argument. Tajuddin, on the other hand, was a man broken from the inside. He hadn't just lost Ayomide, he had lost his own mirror. The woman who once believed in him, prayed for him, and stood by him even when he didn't deserve it, had finally walked away. He came to her door, eyes red, words trembling. "Ayomide, I didn't know," he whispered, kneeling. "I didn't cheat on you. I swear. I didn't believe in you the way I should have. I let my father's words shape how I treated you." Ayomide stood there quietly, her arms crossed. Her eyes didn't hold hate, just truth. "I'm not angry that you didn't cheat," she said calmly. "I'm hurt because you watched me suffer. You heard them call me names. You saw me cry at night, and you never defended me. You didn't break my womb, Tajuddin. You broke my trust." He cried harder, begging, "Please, please don't leave me." But Ayomide didn't need to yell. She didn't need to curse or throw anything. Her strength was in her stillness. Her power was in finally choosing herself. She stepped back and said, "This isn't about leaving you. It's about returning to me." Then she walked away, not as a victim, but as a woman who had survived the worst kind of betrayal and came out stronger. This wasn't her ending. It was her beginning, and she didn't need anyone's approval to rise. Months passed. The old pain no longer weighed Ayomide down. She had left the walls that once echoed with judgment and found a new home. In Nairobi, a city full of light, noise, and second chances. With nothing but her strength and a suitcase of memories, she started over. Ayomide didn't just want to heal herself. She wanted to help others who had suffered in silence like she once did. So she built something from that pain, a wellness foundation for women who had been shamed, abused, or forgotten because they couldn't have children. Her foundation wasn't just about medicine or support groups. It was about giving these women back their names, their voices, their stories. She met women who had been divorced, disowned, and even labeled cursed, just like her. But when they walked into her center, they were treated like queens. With every woman she helped, a part of her own soul healed. Laughter returned to her days. Peace returned to her sleep. Ayomide also began fostering children, not out of charity, but out of love. Each child was a new chapter. She wasn't chasing motherhood anymore. She was living it, on her terms. Her home was filled with books, music, prayers, and the sound of tiny feet running across tiled floors. One day, during an interview with a local magazine, the journalist asked her, "How did you survive all that pain?" She smiled, then replied with a sentence that the world would never forget. "I was never barren. Their love was." That quote exploded online. People from around the world shared her story. Women found hope. Men found understanding. Even those who had judged her once now admired her strength. Ayomide never planned to be famous. She only wanted peace. But sometimes, when you stand tall in the truth, the world can't help but listen. Her past had tried to bury her, but she had used it to grow roots. And now she was blooming, not because she was lucky, but because she chose to rise where others expected her to fall. One quiet morning, just as the Nairobi sun rose gently across her windows, Ayomide sat in silence, staring at a small white stick in her hand. 2 pink lines. Her breath caught in her throat. She read the result over and over again, unable to believe it. After everything, after all the pain, shame, and healing, life had found her anyway. She hadn't taken a single treatment, no pills, no procedures, no rituals. Her body, once blamed and insulted, had quietly worked on its own time. And now, it whispered the news she never thought she would hear. She was pregnant. But this time, her tears weren't about longing. They were about peace. Her hands trembled, not out of fear, but deep joy. joy that had been earned, not given. As her belly grew, so did her joy. Friends, supporters, and the women from her foundation surrounded her with love. They had seen her when she had nothing, no child, no husband, no peace. And now they stood with her as she bloomed fully, carrying not just a baby, but the story of hope. Months later, Ayomide appeared on national TV, invited to speak again about her foundation, her journey, and her faith. She wore white, glowing, peaceful, powerful. In her arms was her newborn daughter, wrapped gently in a soft pink shawl. Her eyes sparkled, not because of the lights or the cameras, but because she had walked through fire and come out gold. In the audience, far in the back row, sat Chief Adekunle. The once proud, loud and arrogant man now looked small, his back hunched, his eyes wet. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The same mouth that once called Ayomide a witch was now silent, sealed by truth. He had lost everything: respect, family, and the trust of those he once ruled over. All he had now was the haunting image of the woman he once humiliated, standing tall, smiling, and stronger than ever. Ayomide closed her speech with a simple line that would echo far beyond that room. "I wasn't waiting for a child to feel whole. I was waiting to remember who I've always been."